Tales from the Edge of Straavaldsen-ness, or frankly, how I got to be this way. So I have another addition to the Learning Burn series. And this is not going to be a real learning burn because the learning burn, I didn't get burnt. So, 5th grade, I started reading about Goddard and rocket experiments. And I read everything our middle school library had on rocketry, every scrap of it. And that got me into the concept of experimenting with rocketry, and particularly the thing that Goddard was notorious on doing and had a lot of struggles toward, which was liquid-fueled rocketry. One of the easiest mixes, the compounds you frequently can get around the house, is hydrogen peroxide and alcohol, which is one of the combos that Goddard experimented with. So I went on a long process of trying to figure out how to make a liquid rocket like that using household items. One of the key parts of it is you got to preheat the alcohol, get it up to temperature, get the whole fluid that you're going to be burning up to an appropriate temperature to light it. I also didn't have high-test hydrogen peroxide. I'm sure that's something my parents to this day would dance in the street about. But I did work on the fuel to oxidizer ratio based on what the books vaguely said and did a lot of experiments. And I got to what I thought was approximately right, but really had trouble from around the house figuring out how to properly preheat it and ignite it without potentially causing an event that would attract unnecessary attention from the local fire department. So I learned one of the key things about experimenting with fire and potentially all learning burns is they're best done not in your house. So I came to the idea that a really good way to preheat would be a Dixie cup. So you'd fill about a Dixie cup about halfway up with the fuel oxidizer mix, and you'd light the top edge of it. Now that would then cause the surface of that fluid that you're trying to ignite to preheat as the fire worked its way down, because wax and paper is a really good wicking. It burns really nicely. It's like a candle. And by the time it would get down, it might ignite. So my first take on doing this experiment was to go over to my friend Chad's house and do it in the middle of his garage. Mixed up the stuff, brought over the hydrogen peroxide. You can't get 60% because it just spontaneously explodes. So you got to make do with like 30%, which for some reason they'll sell a fifth grader at the local department store or a drugstore down the street, and rubbing alcohol. So we did it, middle of his garage, lighting went nicely, came down, hit the surface, and briefly we had these little spurts of a culminated flame going fantastic. We let it burn, got down to the point where it went out because that kind of hydrogen peroxide won't sustain the fire, but it was a really neat experiment. So the burn part of this is that my friend Chad decided to replicate this experiment when I wasn't around, and his learning fire experience was he replicated it against the side of his garage. And a culminated flame against the wood sheathing inside of your garage does cause your garage to immediately burst into flames. No one was hurt, but Chad did partially burn down the garage. So there's a learning burn, but it wasn't mine, and I was nowhere near the place as I could prove. So one of the side effects of learning burns is proving you're not near the burning that you're learning from.